Hello everyone, and welcome to CoasterGuy23 review number 5. Today's review will be yet another big hitter as we'll be discussing Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa. First, jumping into the basic statistics, Iron Gwazi opened in 2022 and as of 2025 is in its 4th year of operation. It's located at Busch Gardens Tampa in Tampa, Florida. It's a conversion of the original wooden coaster Gwazi, which was the GCI dueling coaster. However, Iron Gwazi's lift structure is completely new and it does not at all follow the path of any of the dueling wooden tracks. Thus, I would consider Iron Gwazi a partly converted RMC coaster. It uses RMC's signature iBox track with RMC's swing axle trains. This is the same combo that I discussed in both my previous Steel Vengeance and Wildcats Revenge reviews. The basic counting stats, it has a height of 206 feet, a speed of 76 miles per hour, and a track length of 4,075 feet. Jumping into its elements, Iron Gwazi consists of 13 total elements, including 9 airtime moments, 2 inversions, and 2 maneuvers. Its inversions are its signature death roll and a 0G stall. Its 2 maneuvers are an overbank turn and the final turn into the brake run. And of course, the rest of its moments are all focused on airtime. These 13 elements combine for a drop to brake ride time of 47.08 seconds. Not elite, but also far from terrible. 13 elements in 47 seconds is really good, but ideally you would want that 45 seconds to be a smidgen longer. Now we see all those 13 elements laid out on this force chart, and as you can see, a lot of those elements really hit in terms of forces, especially airtime. You can see that the first couple of elements really have these long sustained moments of ejector airtime, whereas towards the end here, you can see that these elements are really quick, violent pops of ejector airtime. We can kind of already tell by looking at this force chart that nothing Iron Gwazi does is really taken slowly or under-delivers. And that, to me, is Iron Gwazi's main calling card and what makes it an elite roller coaster. To better understand this force chart, we'll go through the POV and see exactly what moments lie where and how the force chart says they deliver. Starting off, we have just our basic lift hill here, same as the other RMCs that I've covered, 45 degrees, same speed, same noises, nothing crazy special about this. Iron Gwazi also doesn't really have a pre-drop either. But now we get going into Iron Gwazi's first drop, and this is one of the best first drops that I have personally experienced. I know I've been saying that a lot about first drops in my reviews recently, but I'm starting off at the top of my list, so of course a lot of the first drops are going to be good. The only one I've reviewed so far that I would take over this one is probably ElToro's, and even then, it's close. With an airtime score of 47.69, the numbers suggest that this one is just better than Steel Vengeance's. It could just be that extra 1 degree of steepness at 91 degrees, but in reality, this one just feels snappier, the twist at the bottom adds a little kick to it, and overall in the back, you just get more of that whomp. This does feel really stylistically similar to the other RMC straight-ahead drops like Wildcat and Steel Vengeance, but with this height and the degree of descent, this one just executes it the best. Love the head chopper too. Next up, you have this massive 270 degree outer bank turn. And while the airtime sensation is kind of similar to Steel Vengeance's, the approach to the element is much different. Compared to this, Steel Vengeance approach is very straight ahead, whereas on Iron Gwazi, you are curving up and then flipping out and then continuing on the left-handed curve. This makes the whip and laterals into the airtime of the outer bank turn much more pronounced and stronger, and overall probably is a more fun maneuver. However, this comes at a cost of shortening the actual length of airtime that you get on this element, just because you're held out there less and the track length is just a bit shorter and you traverse it more quickly. So while this is more fun and whippy from a maneuver standpoint, Steel Vengeance surpasses this one in terms of airtime. And the airtime score backs that up, as this one only scores a 63.71, whereas Steel Vengeance's outer bank was in the 90s. It's tough to say which of the two I actually prefer, but as you've seen on my cards, you know what I prioritize, so for that reason, I have to give it to Steel Vengeance just because the airtime experience is noticeably better. However, this is still one of the top airtime moments that I've recorded, and this element is overall awesome. I'll take an outer bank 10 times out of 10. It's tough to say though if this is my favorite element on Iron Gwazi, as like I said, all these elements are just so good in their own unique way that it's hard for me to just pick one, but this is definitely up there. The exit of the drop into this element is also Iron Gwazi's longest moment of sustained positives, but like with most RMCs, as I've said, they just don't really specialize in long sustained moments of positives, and Iron Gwazi never really clears 4 Gs of positives throughout the entire ride, as seen in the force chart. Up next is Iron Gwazi's signature element, hence its signature name, the death roll. This is the first of its kind, and probably the last based on the circumstances needed to pull this element off. Essentially, it's a right-hand 180 degree turn upwards into a barrel roll down drop of the opposite direction. The actual inversion in this element isn't fancy, as you can find this kind of element on other roller coasters. It's essentially just a barrel roll down drop, but there are 2 things to me that stand out as to why this element is so revered and amazing. Firstly, and more technically speaking, the overall change in banking in this element is just absurd. When you begin rolling, you are still 90 degrees pointed to your right, and you have to rotate all the way back to even around to the left. That's 450 degrees of rotation in barely over 3 seconds. To accomplish that, you need to rotate quickly, and that gives you some really good whip and just makes this element so much fun to experience as you just right through the roll. Not to mention, as you enter that even part right before the roll, you just get a little bit of pop of airtime just because of the shaping as you're trying to get pointed downward into the roll. I'm not sure if there's full airtime here or if it's just weightlessness, but doing it while you're rotating that quickly definitely adds to the craziness. Secondly, this effect is kind of lost for me because I took 4 rides on this thing, but on your first time, no matter how many times you watch the POV, you will just not be prepared for when this element hits you. You're going up that right-hand turn, waiting for it to come, and before you're even ready, boom, it happens, and all of a sudden, it's over. The element of surprise and overall rate of rotation is what makes this element special to me. Now, I like this inversion better than all the ones on Steel Vengeance, all the ones on Wildcat's Revenge, but I do not think it is better than the Mosasaurus roll. I can absolutely see the argument for both ways, but for what I'm looking for in an inversion, the Mosasaurus roll just edges this one out very slightly. Up next is this overbank turn that kind of twists out straight at the end. If I had to pick one Iron Gwazi element that you could call as filler, this would be it. However, this element is over so quickly that it doesn't really act as well, filler. The snap at the end as you transition from a high banking position to flat track is also pretty fun and is definitely the highlight of this element for me. And to be honest, I'm not really sure what other element RMC could have opted for here. This is kind of an enlarged version of Steel Vengeance's Stangle Dive, except taken at a much better pace. There's not much else RMC could have done here, and it keeps a good pace, so this element is fine with me. Just fine though, nothing special. Speaking of special though, up next we have this Twist and Shout. A Twist and Shout is a very unique element where you turn hard one direction and then flip the opposite way into a reverse wave turn type maneuver. I don't know, this element is kind of hard to explain. Just look at the POV in front of you if you're not sure what these are. When I first came to ride Iron Gwazi, this is the element I was looking forward to most. Not because I thought it was going to be the best, but just because this is something that I had never experienced before, and I just really needed to feel the sensation for myself. Overall, I would say it about met my expectations. With an airtime score of 36.21, it definitely delivers on that front, although most of its score comes from the length that it's held rather than the airtime strength it provides. This element provides a nice and steady half a G of airtime for about 1.7 seconds. While there are other elements that deliver airtime stronger than this one, just the sheer maneuver into the airtime and then the floating sensation as you are pointed outwards toward the station is just something very unique. Just when you think the element is going to flatten out, it keeps you out there and keeps giving you that airtime. For this reason, this Twist and Shout absolutely destroys the one that's on Velocicoaster. Not even close in my opinion, and the airtime score will back that up. This is also an element I just watch off ride sometimes and think, how is there no jerkiness or snappiness to this element? But RMC works their magic and somehow makes this element roll so fluid and give great airtime. We flatten out and now we go into our step up, which kind of features a sharp dive to the left right as you're completing it. This element is over very quickly and kind of gets lost in Iron Gwazi's sea of other really strong elements. With an airtime score of 6.98, it's nothing to write home about, but that's still a pretty nice ejector pop, and with a fun twist at the end, so I'll take it all day. Up next, we have this left-handed wave turn. With an airtime score of 12.89, there is a noticeable pop of airtime as you're sideways on this guy. The pace taken through the turn is really good too, especially for the elevation you are off the ground. It maintains the theme of all of Iron Gwazi's layout: speed, power, and execution. The step up we just went through before this is Iron Gwazi's weakest moment of airtime, and it's still a nice solid half a G pop of airtime. I know it may seem like I'm glossing over some of these elements. They do all really hit super hard. Like this wave turn, even though it happens so fast, has more airtime than Velocicoasters. This is the whole theme of Iron Gwazi in my opinion, and what makes it so great. Up next we have element number 8 in our second inversion, which is an RMC signature 0G stall. Right hand up, this is probably the least of my favorite RMC 0G stalls. I probably even prefer the one on Jersey Devil to this one. Plain and simple, this stall just isn't held long enough, and really could use a different profile to just give it that overall 0G hang time that other stalls provide. I think just entering this stall from the elevated wave turn just makes the profiling a little bit more of a challenge for this one, thus this ends up being one of the weaker RMC 0G stalls. Now I know I'm being negative, but the reality is an RMC 0G stall is still probably in my top 20% of inversions. Just going through my reviews I've done so far, the only inversions I probably prefer to this one are Wildcat's Revenge's 0G stall, Wildcat's Revenge's first 0G roll, the Mosasaurus roll, and that's about it. And I guess a death roll earlier on Iron Gwazi, but when I have to knock an inversion by comparing it to one earlier on the same ride, it's kind of counterintuitive to the ride's review, don't you say? Up next, we have a shimmy from left to right. I don't know what RMC did differently here from Wildcats Revenge's shimmy, other than that this takes place later in the ride and it's probably taking a little bit more speed, but this shimmy just hits so much harder. This is supported by its airtime score of 23.65. With how fast this element is taken, 23.65 is an insane score. Just looking back at the force chart around 36 seconds, you can see the abrupt change from positive to negative, and if that's just your butt hitting the seat, flying into the lap bar, and then hitting the seat again. If you have room on that lap bar, you will physically be removed from your seat and then fall back into it when the airtime moment is over. Is it super sustained? No, but an element of this size, it can't really be. It does its absolute best with what it is. Again, nearly perfect execution on what Iron Gwazi is trying to do on its layout. I also like how they already included a step up in the layout that they decided to mix it up with a shimmy, so just overall incorporating some variety. Another thing that Iron Gwazi does very well. Following the shimmy, I'm going to talk about elements 10 and 11 together, which are these two pops right here. This force file was taken towards the back, so the second pop is going to hit harder than the first because of the elevation changes, but the first pop has a score of 10.19 and the second one has a score of 29.19. For elements of this size taken at this speed, 10.19 is already a good score, but a 29.19 is absolutely crazy, and some foreshadowing is going to get even crazier on this last little bunny hill in the back row. Now I hate to get too much into big picture stuff during the POV breakdown, but I must address something real quick. I have seen on various multiple locations online people calling Iron Gwazi's second half meandery or uneventful. I don't like to speak in absolutes, but that notion is just simply not correct. People can say whatever about the force chart, but just go back and look at the second half of this force chart and tell me with a straight face that Iron Gwazi's second half is meandery or uneventful. These are forces and pops of airtime that a lot of roller coasters can't even pull off at very high speeds, let alone in the second half right before a brake run. And I haven't even announced the airtime score for this final bunny hill yet, which, spoiler alert, is the strongest one of the ones that I'm covering here. People are going to hate and call BS on the force chart and whatever, but unless you can provide me a specific piece of evidence that proves my force chart wrong, or somehow some other evidence that this is actually meandering, then I'm just going to stick with the very obvious fact that this is, in fact, not meandering and is pulling forces that most coasters don't at all. Going off the force chart, if this second half is meandering, then I guess just all RMCs and all roller coasters in general are meandering, pulling these forces, I guess. Jumping back into actual analysis, these two airtime pops are pretty row dependent depending on which one you'll get more. In the front, pop 1 will hit harder, and in the second, you'll just get absolutely whomped in the back row going into this right-hand turn. I'll maintain that Iron Gwazi has the strongest bunnies I've ever experienced on a roller coaster, and we're going to keep that right on going as we go into this last little bunny hill before the brake run. On first ride, this hill completely caught me off guard, and I knew it was going to score very well on the airtime score, like more than I ever imagined going into this ride. So, when I broke down the ride force file, I needed some affirmation, and I got it, and then some. In row 11, this bunny hill scored a whopping 52.96. This little bunny hill is in the same weight class as El Toro's Camelbacks. Yes, it's a little row dependent, but I don't care. The last hurrah of Iron Gwazi is a sustained ejector airtime moment. Speed, power, execution. Every single element. And now we hit the brakes, and that'll wrap up my POV breakdown for Iron Gwazi. Reviewing Iron Gwazi's airtime scores, we can see that overall it does extremely well with a total score of 283.47 and 9.28 total seconds of airtime. This is a monster score, especially for having only 9 airtime moments. 9 airtime moments isn't insignificant or anything, that's just a very hard score to achieve when you have only 9 airtime moments. Its highlight airtime moments are the outer bank turn, the first drop, and the bunny hill at the end. That bunny at the end is so amazing that I really think it deserves its own special element nickname like the death roll has. Overall, I don't think there's any single airtime moment you could look at and just go, Steel Benches didn't have many, but it had a couple. Velocicoaster and El Toro both had multiple of them. With its lowest airtime moment barely scoring below a 7, Iron Gwazi excels in airtime strength. Almost all ejector, with the only argument for floater being the couple elements that lead into the 0G stall. With the element by element breakdown out of the way, we can now jump into the bigger picture stuff. Working from the lower priority items into the higher priority items, first up we have theming. And as far as I'm concerned, Iron Gwazi has no theming, and if it does, I'm not aware of it. There's no storytelling in the queue, there's no meaning behind the name other than the wooden coaster it replaced, but the logo does look nice. So I'll give it a little sliver, but overall the theming is pretty bad. Up next we have, oh boy, presentation. Unless you are new to coasters or if you live under a rock, you know that Iron Gwazi has some of the worst operations for any high-end coaster anywhere. Everything about them sucks. The dispatch time, where they have the staff positioned, how they group riders to get in line, the loose article policy that was just implemented that is absolutely ridiculous as they charge you $4 to put your phone in a locker. There is not one redeemable quality about how this coaster operates. I guess overall the area of the ride is nice and it does look pretty cool at night with the lighting, so that saves it from being the absolute bottom of the barrel presentation. That being said, presentation is a low priority item to me, and that could be a little controversial because I have seen people really hammer Iron Gwazi for its terrible operations, but to me, I really just don't want to punish what RMC did with this layout because Busch Gardens Tampa doesn't know how to run this coaster correctly. Yes, getting actually in your seat on this coaster sucks, but once you're in it, the operation stuff goes out the window to me. And the far more important stuff, just all the stuff on the left of your screen, takes over. Up next we have laterals, and Iron Gwazi has a couple decent moments of laterals. Like most RMCs, it is not lateral focused at all. The laterals it does have are just purely out of convenience. The main moment that sticks out to me is that between the two pops, there's a turn that's not as banked as it should be, so you get a little bit of right-handed laterals there. And you get some in certain transitions, such as going into the twist and shout or the outer bank turn. But overall, Iron Gwazi does have probably good laterals for an RMC, but in the grand scheme of coasters, they're just okay. Up next, we've got trains, and I've already discussed the RMC swing axles on my channel before and how I like them a lot more than most people do. But hey, I find them very comfortable, so to each their own, I guess. The calf guards don't bother me. I think the airtime into the lap bar is very comfortable, and overall, they just feel open air, they're comfy, and they ride great. Up next, we have propulsion, and it's just your typical RMC lift hill. Nothing really much to discuss here. Up next, we have positives, and I'm giving Iron Gwazi a pretty similar score to what I gave all the other RMCs, as it really never hits over 3.5G, but it does hold it for a pretty long time in certain sections, such as at the bottom of the drop. So, positives, pretty average, maybe slightly above. Up next, we have inversions, and Iron Gwazi only has 2, but those 2 inversions are an extremely elite one and one that's above average. That death roll does a lot of heavy lifting on the inversion front, and honestly, they probably could have done one more, but that's more of a layout length issue because I wouldn't really sub any of the airtime movements out for an inversion. But with only 2 inversions, this is about as high as I can score it. If that stall was a little better, maybe I would slide a little bit to the right, but I think right here is completely fair when talking about Iron Gwazi's 2 inversions. Up next, we have variety, and overall, Iron Gwazi's variety is pretty good. It is very airtime focused, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just doesn't have variety like a Wildcats Revenge or a Velocicoaster. You know I don't really care about that as much, and I'm fine with all the airtime moments, but I definitely think it's a valid complaint that it could have thrown in another inversion or airtime moment. And that's, again, more of a duration thing, but we'll get to that in a minute. The airtime, I think it mixes it up well enough, although a couple moments may bleed together for some people, but overall, I can't score Iron Gwazi as having elite variety, but it is definitely very good on that front. Up next, we have maneuvers. Iron Gwazi only has 2 of them, and neither of them I would say are memorable enough to stick out in the sea of other really good elements on this ride. Still though, I think a really whippy maneuver actually would have really helped out Iron Gwazi. Even reconfiguring the overbank to feel more like a Stengel dive would have really made it that much more of a memorable moment and given Iron Gwazi that key maneuver that it can fall back on. This one may be a little harsh, but I'm going to go significantly below average for Iron Gwazi's maneuvers. Now we get to the second highest priority column, which Iron Gwazi, as you can see, absolutely dominates. Up first, we have smoothness, and this smoothness is very comparable to the 2 other RMCs that I've done on this channel. For my rides in August of 2024, that RMC swing axle train with RMC iBox track is still running good as new, absolutely perfect, 0 complaints, smoothness gets a perfect score. Up next, we have pacing, and once again, I would say Iron Gwazi is absolutely perfect. Every single element is taken way over speed. Even elements that you would think would be taken more slowly, such as wave turns and bunny hills at the end, you just are still absolutely flying, and speed is kept so well through this ride. Even Iron Gwazi's 0G stall, which normally feels like more of a drawn-out element, is taken at a very high speed and is over quickly. It truly flies all the way into that brake run, and it leaves you breathless. Pacing is a 10 out of 10 perfect. Up next, we have density, and density I'm scoring almost near perfect. My only complaint is that maybe before the 0G stall, it feels a little bit like it's not doing anything, but that's really a minor nitpick that keeps it from being perfect. Iron Gwazi keeps the elements coming in rapid succession with no straight track, filler, or time to breathe in between. It always stays busy, and its density is exceptional. Moving on to the final most important column, I'm going to start with duration. And unfortunately, if there's one thing to really hold this ride back, it's this. And that's rather unfortunate given the amount of structure that the original Gwazi left for this thing. And some of you may disagree, but when I hit the brake one on this guy, I just really wish there was one more loop of elements. Kind of like how the pop in the last bunny, just one more of those, carbon copy even. You can make the argument that that would hurt the overall pacing of Iron Gwazi, but to me, hitting the brakes with all that speed just feels like a little bit of a wasted opportunity when the length feels a little dissatisfying. You can see I have duration above average, and 45 seconds and 13 elements is not bad. It just could be more with that speed you hit the brakes with. Those couple extra elements could have given you the opportunity to add a third inversion too, which really would have helped out. Overall, I just hit the brakes and wish I could have just done a couple more elements. Maybe that's a nitpick and naive, but that's just how I feel. On a more positive note, let's move on to airtime strength. And of the RMCs I've done, Iron Gwazi is the best at this. Even its airtime moments with lesser airtime score hit a high value of -G. And then, of course, you have your three showstoppers, which I would consider the first drop, the Outer Bank turn, and the final bunny hill, all push near or over -1. Sure, not every airtime moment I would say tries to kill you, but you definitely get that noticeable airtime feeling going through every airtime moment, and you don't finish any airtime moment thinking that didn't deliver like I hoped it would. Combining the three showstoppers with the consistency of its airtime strength for Iron Gwazi is near perfect. And then finally, we have airtime quantity, and 9 airtime moments is really good for a roller coaster. Really good, though. I wouldn't say that it is absolutely elite. It makes up for it, though, in its airtime strength, so that's why overall Iron Gwazi has a great airtime experience. But the airtime quantity, they definitely could have used 1 or 2 more moments to really push it to that next level, but I don't think you can be unhappy with the amount of airtime moments Iron Gwazi has. I'm going considerably above average, right in that 7.5 to 8 out of 10 range. Overall, Iron Gwazi is glass smooth and is a complete package ride experience. Its main emphasis is executing every element to absolute perfection and hitting those elements in rapid succession such that you have no time to breathe in between them. I just wish there were a couple more of these perfectly executed elements. As of December 2025, Iron Gwazi ranks number 2 of 1,879 roller coasters in the Captain Coaster database. For me personally, Iron Gwazi comes in at number 2 of my 222 credits. Yes, Vengeance and Gwazi are my 1 and 2, I know, very original of me. But I will briefly touch on the Vengeance versus Gwazi debate since it's a pretty commonly discussed one. For me, the average element on Iron Gwazi is better than the average element on Steel Vengeance. But to make up for that, Steel Vengeance just has more. Make the repetitive argument all you want, but I'll take a ride all day that has 81 seconds of ride time compared to 45. A ride that has 21 airtime moments compared to 9, and a ride that is still hauling through airtime moments, whereas Iron Gwazi is sitting on the brakes for over 30 seconds. Iron Gwazi's quality just cannot make up the massive difference in overall duration, element count, and airtime count that Steel Vengeance has. If you think Iron Gwazi's elements are just that much better that Steel Vengeance's third lap is completely irrelevant, sure, but I just can't get there myself. I feel bad for dissing Iron Gwazi this late in the video, so just to remind everyone, this is my number 2 overall roller coaster and one of the best I've ever experienced, and you gotta get down to Busch Gardens Tampa to check this thing out. That'll conclude CoasterGuy23 review number 5 on Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa. If you don't want to have to wait for all my reviews to come out to view my current list of roller coasters, find me on CaptainCoaster.com, username CoasterGuy. To view my coaster count, parks visited, ride stats, and a bunch of other stuff, friend me on LogRide at CoasterGuy23. To view or download any of my RideForce files, visit my profile on RideForce's DB, also at CoasterGuy23. Thank you guys all for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.